I had a good friend who's since entered the church triumphant who used to enjoy sending me bits of information, and often they came with kind of the unstated challenge to use them somewhere in a sermon. They were stories, there were plenty of puns, and there were comments that just made you think. And I even have a folder on the desktop of my computer at home that says Scott's Gems, and that's where I keep these. And he sent me some about the challenge for someone learning for the first time the English language. And some of those include: the bandage was wound around the wound. Another was, the frightened dove dove into the bushes. But I think my favorite is, he thought there was no time like the present to present the present to his girlfriend. It's confounding if you're learning English as your second language. Heck, it's confounding when you're learning English as your first language and you're in elementary school. But something that's equally confounding and has caused people great stress is the 14th verse of chapter 6 in Matthew's Gospel. It's the verse that immediately follows the Lord's Prayer. If you forgive others their sins, God will forgive your sins. If you do not forgive others their sins, God will not forgive your sins. What in the world does that mean? It's not accidental that it follows the Lord's Prayer. But if we think about it for not too long even, we'll come to realize that what it seems to be saying, if we're taking it literally, is that forgiveness is a quid pro quo deal. If we forgive, God forgives. If we don't forgive, God doesn't forgive. That undermines virtually the entire rest of the New Testament and major portions of the Old Testament, I'd add as well. It's not meant to be taken literally. It's hyperbole. Hyperbole is used to get our attention. Hyperbole is like a flashing sign that says, pay attention, this is important, take this seriously. When Jesus says, boy, I butchered this at the first service, so hopefully I can do a better job at this one. When Jesus says, why do you try to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye and ignore the log in your own? Obviously, that's not literal. Have you ever seen anybody walking with a log in their eye? Have you ever seen anybody walking with a Lincoln log in their eye? It's meant to get our attention and to say, this business of judging others, our human capacity to see in the greatest detail the faults and shortcomings of other people and be blind to our own faults and shortcomings, is astonishing. Except we all share that capacity. This verse in Matthew's Gospel exists to say, hey, pay attention. Forgiveness is central. Forgiveness is the foundation of everything. There would be no relationship with God whatsoever if it was based on our goodness, because our goodness is tainted. And there's an a gap between God's holiness and our sinfulness that by our own effort and willpower and determination, we could never, ever, ever in a million lifetimes get across. So what is being said? It's not that forgiveness is quid pro quo, but that we need to understand that forgiveness is like breathing in and breathing out. Did you know that the quickest way to suffocate is not to have no air, it's to keep breathing in? If we don't breathe in and breathe out, we will suffocate just as surely and probably quicker than if we run out of breath. Forgiveness is a two-way exchange. As we receive forgiveness, we share forgiveness. It's not a matter of human effort. It's not a matter of willpower. It's not even a matter of our desire. It's a matter of our surrender, of our vulnerability, of allowing God's gift of forgiveness to come into our lives. For everything about the Christian walk is based on forgiveness. When Jesus cries out from the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing," Easter is God's yes, I do. Yes, I will. Yes, I forgive. That's Easter. That's the resurrection. That's the good news. Forgiveness is meant to be enjoyed. It's not a duty. It's not an obligation. It's meant to be enjoyed because it empowers us to live as the people God created us to be and become. Forgiveness is our source of faith. It's our source of strength. It's our source of joy. It's our source of peace. It's our source of life. It's that important. The benefits are beyond description. They are literally life-giving and life-transforming. And that begs this question: what gets in the way? What causes us to stumble? I've thought about this for a while, and it seems to me there are three things that get in the way of our experiencing the joy and the fulfillment and the peace and the power that forgiveness can offer us and does offer us. And the first of those things is that we settle for the idea of forgiveness instead of experiencing the reality of forgiveness. We settle for the idea of forgiveness instead of experiencing the reality of forgiveness. Why do we settle? Because it's so much easier to settle for the idea of forgiveness. We can agree with it, we can accept it, and we can move on. We can say, that's good, that's the way it's supposed to be. Experiencing the reality of forgiveness is more challenging. It requires us to surrender, and there are few things we want to do less than surrender. It requires us to be vulnerable. And if surrendering is at the top of the list, vulnerability is 1A. And it requires us to be honest with ourselves and see who we truly are rather than who we wish we were. Those aren't easy things to do, but they are incredibly rewarding. In a nutshell, to experience the power of the reality of forgiveness, we need to become powerless. Powerlessness is not the same as weakness. Powerless is the time when we say, I need to look beyond myself to a power greater than mine. It's at the heart of the Christian faith. It's at the heart of a joyful life. It's at the heart of a significant life and a meaningful life. It's amazing. It's not that the idea of forgiveness isn't important. It is very important. But when we settle for the idea instead of going its full distance to experience the reality of forgiveness, it's like saying, you know what? Gathering the family together with kids, we're going to go and we're going to have the greatest day at the beach we've ever had. The weather's supposed to be wonderful. There's a great breeze offshore. We're going to love every second of it. And you pack up the back of the car with things for the beach, and you open the garage door and you get ready to go. You get and sit in the car, turn it on, and back out to the end of the driveway and stop. I guarantee you it won't take long for that to become a not very nice experience if you've got kids in the car. We were on our way for a 3,000-mile trip, and before we'd gone 30 feet out of our driveway, one of our sons said, "This trip is a big mistake." Now, that's a great send-off, I'm telling you. But if we accept the idea of forgiveness, and that's as far as we go, it's like sitting at the end of the driveway for the whole day with kids who get more and more and more difficult to live with each passing moment. The experience of forgiveness, experiencing the reality of that, is a life changer, it's a game changer. Some of you will remember I told several years ago the story of a man called Alfred Sample. That wasn't the name that the story began with. He was known as Racehorse. He was born to a mother that had other things she needed to do, and she spent all her time telling this boy what a miserable, rotten kid he was, that he was a waste, he was a mistake, he was just a total disaster. And you know what he did? He spent every ounce of energy he had proving her right. And it wasn't long before he had the title incorrigible criminal going with his name. He was in and out of jail, and then he was in and out of prison, and then he was in and out of the worst prison for the worst offenders in the state of Texas. He was a lost cause. Nobody could do anything with him. He would make regular trips for a month at a time to the hole, where he was fed a piece of moldy bread and a small glass of water once a day. And he took that as a badge of honor. How tough he was. And he would show everybody. They thought the name incorrigible criminal didn't even begin to describe him. Until one day in the hole, in the midst of the darkness, he broke apart. And whimpering, he cried out, "Does anybody hear me? Does anybody hear me?" And lo and behold, in the midst of the darkness, a light began to shine, and a voice came along with the light. "I love you. You are my precious child." Reishaus went into solitary confinement the whole he came out, Albert Sample. And what he did for the remainder of his life transformed in many ways the Texas penal system. And when it was time to celebrate his memorial service, there were dignitaries from not only the state, but the nation that came to celebrate him. And you know the title that they gave him? Wasn't incorrigible criminal. It was national treasure. That's the power of forgiveness when we experience the reality of it and don't just settle for the idea of it, no matter how much easier the idea is. That's one thing that gets in the way of our experiencing forgiveness. Another thing that gets in the way of our experience forgiveness is we settle for false forgiveness instead of true forgiveness. And I wrestled with what word to use for false. I could have used phony, I could have used inauthentic, I could have used sham, and I could have picked even others. Counterfeit. It's an insidious kind of forgiveness because it is so widespread. It's pretend forgiveness. It's when we overlook what somebody has done because it might create conflict, or it might make somebody feel bad, or one of 1,000 and other excuses that we often use. And excuses are nothing more than lies dressed in Sunday clothing. Excuses are nothing more than lies dressed in Sunday clothing. We make those excuses because what true, authentic forgiveness calls for is often tough love. And tough love is named tough love because it's tough to do. It's hard to do. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes it makes us get way, way, way out of our comfort zone. Tough love says to a person, you and I, all of us, need to be responsible for what we do or don't do, what we say or don't say. Excusing that ushers in what in the therapeutic community is known as enabling. True forgiveness isn't a duty, something we ought to do, something we're supposed to do, something we should do. True forgiveness is rooted in experiencing God's forgiveness and being empowered by that. It's amazing how false forgiveness carries with it again and again and again and again words like ought and should and supposed to and duty. And this is what we as Christians are supposed to do. It's not. We're called to forgive, but that's That's a two-way exchange. It requires responsibility. The word we often use is repentance, acknowledging what we have or haven't done, have or haven't said, and the hurt and harm it may have caused. True forgiveness is legitimate. False, fake, phony, pretend, inauthentic forgiveness doesn't require any of that. Let's just move on. Let's pretend it didn't happen. Let's ignore it. And I can tell you, at least based on my experience, it never, ever, ever works. The issues keep coming up and keep causing heartache and more. We choose the idea of forgiveness over experiencing the reality of it. We settle because it's so much easier for false forgiveness rather than true forgiveness, because forgiveness always requires responsibility. And that's what leads to change and growth and new life. And lastly, we forget the incredible power of forgiving small things, things that on the surface don't seem to matter much, but they're really important. Next weekend is Memorial Day weekend. I think I figured that out right. I used to know, like probably all of you, that Memorial Day came on the 31st. It wasn't a jumping around holiday. But Memorial Day weekend of 1984, I got a phone call on Friday afternoon from somebody who said, "This is Hawk McGinnis. I'm at the church, and I'm a retired United Methodist pastor from Plano, Texas. And I was wondering if you knew if there was a place I could spend the weekend. I'm on a walk all across the country, and I'm here in Boardman, Ohio." So I went to the church and met this fellow. My goodness, what a sight. He stood as tall as I did. He had a wooden staff with him that was 6 feet tall. It had a knife on each end. It was about the size of the thickest part of a baseball bat. He had 2 knives on the side that were, come to find out, were perfectly balanced. One was a custom-made Bowie knife, and if you grew up with Davy Crockett, you know what a Bowie knife is. And so we had him come to our house to stay. And our sons at the time were 4, 6, 8, and 10. And they were wide-eyed. And he showed them his knives. And of course, their question was, "Daddy, can we throw these?" And I'm pretty sure Cinda was in the house because I said yes. So we got a log and we put it in a backyard, and he showed them how to throw it. He taught them how to do it. And each one of them did it, and it stuck. And I wish in 1984 we'd had iPhones. Oh, I would have loved to have had a picture of the look on our boys' faces when they did that. The glee, the joy that was there was locked up in here. I wish I could show you a picture. It was so great. And as the weekend unfolded, we got to know one another, and I asked him, what were the most challenging things that he experienced? He said, "Well, there was a time in Wyoming when I threw my back out and I had to lay down in my tent for 10 days before I could move. Having thrown my back out, I knew something of what he was talking about." And then the next thing that he told me is what took me totally by surprise at first. But then I thought about it. He said, "You know what's even more challenging than that?" He said, when I'm walking along and a little tiny, teeny, broken off piece of a rock gets in my shoe, either it gets in under my heel or it gets in the toe. I don't know how they get in there, but they get in there. And if you've ever been on a walk, enjoying a walk, and one of those little tiny rocks has gotten in your shoe, you know that it messes the rest of the walk up until you get rid of the rock. They're so small that sometimes you can't even see them. You got to feel in your shoe to find out where that is to get it out. And he said, that's the most challenging thing I experience. And this week, as I was reflecting for this sermon, I got to thinking how many little things happen in our lives that seem so insignificant that we don't give them a nanosecond's thought. But somehow they get buried in us, and over time, they grow. And they become worse and worse and worse. We have a way we can get rid of that and can cut that process off right at the pass. It's called forgiveness. I don't think it's by accident that 1 month later, Cinda and I were part of a leadership team for the National Convention for United Methodist Marriage Encounter, and a couple who was presenting there taught us something that we have applied to our lives ever since. And you don't need to know the math. 1984 is a long time ago. And it goes like this. When one of us has said or done something, or hasn't said or hasn't done something that's hurt the other in some way, the offender, I have lots of opportunities to take this role, says, will you forgive me? And then we name what it is we did or didn't do or said or didn't say. And then the other has the opportunity to say, I need some more time, or yes, I forgive you now, when it's legitimately forgiving. And those teensy little things that almost are invisible go away right away. And we can get on with our relationship without those things growing into something that at some point could become very detrimental and damaging. Will you forgive me? Name the thing that I did, said, or didn't do, or didn't say specifically, and then allow the other person the space to respond when he or she is ready to respond honestly and sincerely. Yes, I forgive you. It's amazing how many small things just go right away. I have a good friend in Ohio who has a saying, if you don't get the foundation right, the rest of the job is a headache, and maybe a costly headache. We get the foundation of forgiveness right when we choose to experience the reality of forgiveness instead of just settling for the idea. We get the foundation right when we choose the tougher road of honest, true forgiveness rather than the easy path of false, pretend forgiveness. And when we take and invest the time and energy to forgive one another for the little things before they become big things. Amen.